4 coaches were banned from professional women's soccer for life. Not one of them was stopped by the league that paid them. They were stopped by the players they harmed, women who put their names to the truth, knowing it could end their careers. For years, the machine did the opposite of protecting them. It moved accused coaches from club to club, quietly, with clean references and public praise. This is the story of how that machine was finally forced to answer for itself, and why the answer took more than a decade. If you think accountability in women's sports deserves to be documented, subscribe to Field Queens. It helps this kind of reporting reach the people who lived it. On September 30th, 2021, The Athletic published an investigation by reporter Meg Linehan. In it, 2 players, Sinead Farrelly and Mana Shim, described years of sexual coercion and misconduct by Paul Riley, then the head coach of the North Carolina Courage. They did not speak anonymously. Farrelly's account reached back to 2011, when she was a young player just starting out. She had spent years trying to leave it behind her. Within hours, Riley was fired. But this was never about one bad coach. Within a single season, the league came apart. Christy Holly had already been fired for cause at Racing Louisville that August. Rory Dames resigned at the Chicago Red Stars in November. Richie Burke was gone at the Washington Spirit. 4 clubs, 4 coaches, 1 season, and one question nobody in charge wanted asked out loud: how long had they known? Here is what makes this a story about the system, not just the men. The allegations against Riley stretched back to 2010, across more than a dozen of his former players, according to The Athletic. He was let go by the Portland Thorns after the 2015 season and hired by another club within months, with the Thorns praising him publicly on his way out. The complaints existed, the paper trail existed. Mana Shim had filed a formal complaint against Riley back in 2015. The Thorns looked into it and let his contract lapse. By the next season, he was coaching another NWSL club. And still, he kept coaching. For the players, speaking up in 2021 meant risking the only careers they had in a league that at the time barely paid a living wage. Farrelly had already walked away from the game once because of it. What changed in 2021 was not that the abuse was new. What changed was that 2 women decided the silence was worse. They were not chasing headlines. They were trying to make sure it stopped happening to the players who came after them. Then came the investigations, 2 of them running in parallel. On October 3, 2022, U.S. Soccer released the findings of an independent inquiry led by Sally Yates, the former Deputy Attorney General, and the law firm King & Spalding. Investigators spoke with more than 200 players. Their conclusion was not softened for the public. It was the product of a year-long inquiry that ran to hundreds of pages. The report found that, in its own words, abuse and misconduct, verbal and emotional abuse and sexual misconduct, had become systemic, spanning multiple teams, coaches, and victims. Abusive coaches, it found, had been quietly passed from club to club. And leaders at U.S. Soccer and the league had been warned repeatedly and had failed to act. Beyond the abuse itself, the report described a culture of silence and fear of retaliation, where players who complained risked being labeled difficult, and coaches who were pushed out simply resurfaced somewhere else. The pattern was almost mechanical. A coach would be quietly moved on, his record left unspoken, and the next club would hire him without ever learning why the last one let him go. But the Yates report was only half of the reckoning. A second investigation, this one run jointly by the league and the players' union, the NWSLPA, spent 14 months examining the clubs themselves. It was carried out by the law firms Covington and Burling and Weil, Gottschall and Manges. Its report, released on December 14, 2022, found misconduct at more than half the teams in the league. More than half. Not a handful of rogue figures, but a structural failure that touched club after club. Our league systemically failed to protect our players, the joint statement read. This time, the findings arrived with names attached, and with consequences. In January 2023, the penalties finally landed. The NWSL permanently banned 4 coaches from ever working in the league again. A lifetime ban meant exactly that. They could never coach, manage, or hold any role in the league. For a sport this small, where the same names circulate for decades, that was as close to permanent exile as the league could impose. Paul Riley and Christy Holly for sexual misconduct and verbal abuse across multiple teams, Rory Dames and Richie Burke for emotional abuse and for racist and sexist remarks to players, all according to the joint report. Two more figures, former Utah Royals coach Craig Harrington and former Gotham general manager Elise LaHue, were banned for 2 years, and the clubs paid too. The Chicago Red Stars were fined $1.5 million, the Portland Thorns $1 million. Racing Louisville, the North Carolina Courage, the Reign, and Gotham were fined as well. The fallout eventually reached the owners' boxes. Both the Portland Thorns and the Chicago Red Stars changed hands in the years that followed. The scandal had become too expensive to own. The players' union called it a critical step toward holding clubs and leaders accountable for the actions and the inactions that had betrayed player safety. New rules followed: an anti-harassment policy, mandatory reporting, a confidential hotline, and oversight the league had never had before. And some of the players who spoke got a second act. Sinead Farrelly, who had left the sport in 2015, returned to the field in 2023. She won an NWSL championship with Gotham FC and started all 3 group games for Ireland at that country's first Women's World Cup. But here is the part that should stay with you. None of this happened because the institutions wanted it to. Every safeguard now in place was extracted, pried loose by players who spoke when silence was safer, and by reporters who refused to let the story die. The coaches were banned only after the evidence became impossible to ignore. The fines were paid only after the failures were printed in black and white. Change did not arrive as a gift from the people in charge. It arrived as a bill they were finally forced to pay. Accountability in women's soccer was not handed down from the top. It was forced up from the bottom. A system only protects people when the cost of failing them finally becomes too high to hide. If this story stayed with you, there's another one waiting on your screen right now. Click it, and let's keep pulling the thread together.